It was an ordinary day like any other. I woke up in the morning, prepared breakfast, and sat down to eat while reading the newspaper. After a while, the doorbell rang. I headed toward the door, saying, coming, just a minute." I opened the door but found no one there. I was about to turn and close the door again when I caught a glimpse of a small box on the doorstep. The box was medium-sized, brown, and had raised lines on it, but its shape was frightening because they resembled human veins. The box looked strange but distinctive. I picked it up and went inside, wondering who had sent me this strange box and what was inside it. I opened the box, curious to see what it contained, and found a pile of leather that resembled the leather used for winter coats. The leather was very soft and had a strange mix of white and red, and when I looked closer, my heart nearly stopped from fear because this leather was not synthetic. It was genuine human skin. Yes, human skin, as if it had been removed from a human body. I felt a wave of terror, but I noticed a folded letter underneath the leather along with an agenda. I set the leather aside and took the letter and the agenda. I quickly opened the agenda and found it contained names of people and dates next to each name, with several pages of text between each name. I thought to myself, I don't have time to read all of this. I'll open the first letter to find out who sent me this strange box, and then I'll read what's inside the agenda. I opened the letter and began to read. "Dear Mark, I'm sure you were terrified when you learned the truth about the skin in your hands. But believe me, when you know the truth behind its story, you will die of fear. Let me introduce myself. I am Kamal, the top of your class, and because you are the son of a doctor, I was rejected for a university position and you were hired instead. I want to say that you were one of the reasons for my misery in life. You and your father ruined my future and deprived me of the chance to teach at the university because of your father's influence. But there's no time to talk too much about the past, because this letter won't be enough for me to discuss that. I have something more important to tell you about this special gift. I will now tell you the truth about the strange skin in your hands. After I graduated, I tried to work with my degree, but all doors were closed in my face. In the end, I became a sales representative. It was a very exhausting job that required me to travel a lot all over Egypt. One day they asked me to travel to Alexandria to meet some clients, but I was delayed in that city, so I decided to stay the night. I went to the nearest hotel and thanked God that it looked old, which meant the fare would be low. The hotel had wooden floors throughout, and there was a foul smell wafting from every corner. At that moment, all I cared about was sleeping and not anything else. "Room 414, sir," said the receptionist while yawning and handing me the key. I went up to the room, and as soon as I saw the bed, I threw myself onto it and fell into a deep sleep. I woke up startled from sleep hearing that sound. The sound was coming from the room directly below mine. Maybe someone was sick and in pain. The sound was of someone in pain, crying at the same time, and it was clear they were trying to stifle their agony. I knocked on the floor of the room, and don't forget I told you it was made of wood, so the sound travels easily. I called out, "Hey sir, the one below, do you want me to call an ambulance? Are you okay?" No one responded. I repeated my call and knocked harder on the floor than before. "I'm fine, sir. Thanks. You can continue sleeping." That was the response I got from below, but the strange thing was that it was a girl's voice. Yes, a girl's voice, and very delicate too. I didn't think much of it and went back to sleep. Morning came, bringing with it my time to leave the hotel. I packed my bag and went downstairs. While I was leaving, I thought I would stop by the room where I heard the sound to check on her. Maybe she really needed help. I don't know why I did that. She wasn't my neighbor to check on her. She was just a guest at a hotel, but something was pulling me to go see her and make sure she was okay. When I reached in front of her room, I found her door old like all the other hotel doors, but strangely the door had some weird scratches on it. I asked myself in astonishment, what made those scratches? But I didn't waste time thinking and knocked on the door. "Miss, I'm the guest in the room above yours. Are you okay? I just wanted to check on you." Suddenly, the door swung open violently, and I found angry eyes staring at me. I controlled my nerves and tried to hide my fear while speaking to the one who opened the door. It was a middle-aged girl with somewhat delicate features, but her eyes were incredibly furious. Her red eyes looked as if she hadn't slept for a long time, and they were terrifying. "I'm Kamal, your neighbor from upstairs. Are you okay now?" she said in an annoyed tone. "I'm fine. Next time, mind your own business," she said, and then closed the door in my face. I thought to myself, what a strange and frightening person. I was wrong to come down and check on her. I continued down the stairs and handed in my room key. When I asked the receptionist about the name of this guest, he said, looking annoyed, "Her name is Sama, and it's better if you mind your own business. Since when do guests check on each other?" I gathered my things and left, thinking it was good that I finished my work and was heading back to Cairo. Then my phone rang. It was my boss, Mr. Ali, asking me to go to a client to finalize some procedures. I had no choice but to accept. There was no option for me to find another hotel to stay in that night, so I returned to the hotel again. I asked the receptionist to book me an extra night. I didn't know that this extra night would change my life completely, and that all the secrets were about to emerge. The day passed quickly. I finished my work and returned to the hotel to rest. Just like the night before, I threw myself on the bed and fell into a deep sleep. I woke up to the same sound, the sound of pain mixed with crying. It seemed this was going to continue every night. I won't lie, I was curious to know what was happening. So I put my ear to the floor and listened to the sound. The pain and crying were still ongoing. I called out to her, "Miss, would you like me to call an ambulance?" The moaning and crying continued. I thought I had to take action. Her voice reached me, angry, screaming, "I told you to mind your own business." Honestly, I should have listened to her. If I had heard her voice then, I would have been terrified and kept to myself, but unfortunately, I didn't do that. At first, I tried to go back to sleep, but I couldn't because the sound of pain and crying persisted. In the midst of my confusion and curiosity about the girls suffering below, I noticed a small opening in the wooden floor. At that moment, I had an idea I would have never thought of if I were in another situation. I could look through it and see what was happening. I don't know how I did it, but curiosity was overwhelming. I placed my eye on the opening and looked. What I saw was terrifying. Something frightening, something you wouldn't wish to see your whole life. Sama was writhing on the floor in a strange way, crawling like a snake. Her body was completely tense, her limbs moving in all directions frighteningly. Despite all this, she continued to scream in pain. Her features were changing in a strange way. Her hair was turning white, while her face looked like that of an old woman full of wrinkles and cracks. This was not the girl I met today. Yes, it was Sama, but she was transforming before my eyes. Was she human, a ghost, or something else? I no longer understood what I was seeing. It was something I had never seen in my entire life. After a while of her strange behavior and the pain mixed with crying, I saw her stand up and walk normally toward the wardrobe. She opened the wardrobe and pulled out a box. A medium-sized brown box with ridges like human veins. Yes, what I thought about now was real. It was the box you have. But before you do anything you'll regret, let me finish the rest of the story so you know what this box is. At that moment, Sama opened the box and took out a pile of skin. The skin was a strange color, a mixture of white and red, and cautiously she spread the skin on the floor. My blood froze in my veins as the skin spread out. The skin stretched and took the shape of a human body. What is this? Human skin. Complete human skin. All the features were there, specifically the same features as Sama, the same face, the same hands, the same legs. It was like a skin version of her. Calmly, she lay down beside the skin and touched it with her hands. Sama's body seemed to be being pulled and entering into the empty skin. In a few minutes, her entire body was inside the empty skin, while her old body transformed into a pile of skin. The cursed skin. She stood up, and her beautiful features returned, a sense of relief spreading across her face. She placed the empty skin inside the box and closed the wardrobe. Suddenly, I found her looking up, looking at me as if she could see me. I quickly ran back to my bed, my heart racing. "You up there?" she called out to me. I pretended to be asleep and didn't respond. She called out once, twice, and 3 times, but each time I remained silent. Eventually she stopped, and only silence remained. The terrifying silence. The hours passed slowly as I kept thinking about what I had seen and what it meant. Could she be a demon, a practitioner of black magic, or even a creature from another world? I really had no idea what was beneath me. I stayed awake all night, waiting for her to pounce on me at any moment because I had seen something I shouldn't have seen. Surely she wouldn't leave me alone, she would attack me from anywhere. I sat in the room, my mind about to explode from overthinking, too afraid to open the door because I might find her right in front of me. Yes, that's what happens in every horror movie. The night dragged on, and finally morning came, bringing a sense of safety. I focused my hearing on the room below until I heard the door opening and closing. She must have gone out now. Curiosity was killing me, along with fear. I left my room and headed toward her room, standing in front of the door. You're probably wondering why I went back to her room. I don't know. I found myself heading to her room as if I were under a spell. All that occupied my mind was the need to look closely at that box. As I told you, the door was old, and a gentle push would surely open it. I hesitated for a moment, but eventually I pushed the door and entered. I hurried towards the wardrobe. When I opened it, I found the agenda and the box. The strange brown box was right in front of me now. I took it, opened it, and felt the skin. It really had a strange texture. I quickly closed the box and asked myself whether to take it or leave it. There was no time for hesitation. I had to make up my mind. She could return at any moment. Unfortunately, I took the box and went back to my room. I didn't know why I took it, but I knew that it contained a frightening secret. I decided to leave the hotel and take the box with me. I settled my bill and got into a taxi. But on the way, I kept thinking about what would happen to the girl when she returned and found the skin missing. Curiosity returned to me. I had to know. So I asked the taxi driver to take me back to the hotel. As soon as the receptionist saw me, he frowned and said, "Did you forget something?" I tried to smile and said, "I got a call from my boss. He wants me to finish some work too. Please book me another night, and I'd prefer the same room." I sat in the room by the opening in the floor, waiting for Summer's return. After a long wait, night came again, and I saw the door of the room below open. Finally, she was back, and exhaustion was clearly visible on her face. Minutes passed, and she began to writhe in pain. Her hair started to turn white, and her features changed rapidly. The same thing that happened the previous night happened again. When she went to the wardrobe and opened it, no, who took the box? She screamed loudly, breaking everything in the room as if she had turned into a raging beast. Fangs and claws began to appear, like the vampires we see in movies. Suddenly, she stopped, as if she remembered something. She looked up at me, blood dripping from her mouth. Her eyes met mine. This was definitely not a human, she was a demon. With a terrifying scream and all her strength, she jumped towards me. I threw myself backward, afraid she would break through the ground and come after me. I heard a loud thud, enough to loosen one of the floorboards. I ran and stood by the door to escape quickly if she broke through the room's floor. The screaming began to lessen one by one. Minutes passed, and all sounds disappeared. I cautiously approached the opening and looked. Summer was lying on the ground, smoke billowing from every part of her body, as if she were burning and turning to ash. In pain, she raised her hand towards me, as if she were begging me. "The skin! The skin!" I quickly ran from my place, took the skin, and went down to her. I had to save her with all my strength. I broke the door and entered. Her body was fading away. I spread the skin beside her quickly, but strangely, her body continued to burn. What was the reason? I did exactly what I had done before. Minutes later, she turned into a pile of ash. I was confused about what had happened and found no explanation for anything. But I remembered that I saw an agenda in her wardrobe. I quickly opened the wardrobe and took the agenda. I flipped through its pages rapidly, finding names, dates, and stories. I told myself I would read it leisurely at home to understand what I had seen. And that was the last night I would spend in the hotel. I returned home feeling tired and exhausted. I thought the matter was over like that. But I was wrong, because the next day I woke up in the middle of the night. and I feel like my whole body is burning. My hair has started to fall out and turn white. My skin started to wrinkle. My teeth have started to grow. I am experiencing the same thing that was happening to Sama. It seems that whoever holds this cursed skin gets the curse transferred to them. So the curse left Sama and hit me. That's the reason I couldn't save her. I had already touched the skin. I stretched the skin beside me, and within minutes, my body transferred to the empty skin. And I put my old leather jacket inside the box. The curse struck me, and that's it. I had to listen to Sama and leave me alone. But it's done. What's done is done, and now I have to live with this curse. I just said fine, as long as I'm going to live like this. So I have to read about the people mentioned in the agenda, so I can understand the story behind this curse. And the beginning was in 1935 with a famous Egyptian scientist and his team. The topic began with the discovery of an ancient tomb of one of the ancient Egyptian princesses. It is said that she was very disliked by the entire royal court, to the extent that the priests cursed it with the cursed whip's curse, and let her live with this curse for a while, and then we will embalm her while she is still alive. And they placed this box with her in her tomb, believing that the curse would remain with her even in the afterlife. And they don't know that the tomb will be opened and the curse will be transferred to other people. Unfortunately, after opening the tomb, the scientist did not know its name because the ancient Egyptians did not write the names of disliked or cursed figures. But what was special about the princess's mummy was that it was embalmed while she was screaming, and her features were all horror. They called it the Screaming Mummy. The tomb only had the coffin and this box. So the Egyptian scientist took it and became the first cursed person in modern history. And he was the first one to write his story in this agenda. If you read the agenda in the box, you'll find his story and the story of everyone the curse was passed on to. Until my story ends, and don't worry, there are still a few pages left for you to write your story too. After I took the box, the curse was passed on to me. I decided that I won't live like this for long. I was very upset with myself because of my curiosity, and I kept blaming myself a lot for staying in this hotel and taking the box after I saw what was happening to Sama. I just sat and thought a bit about the reason for my presence in Alexandria, and the reason I work as a sales representative. And I realized that all of this happened because of you and your father. You are the main reason for my curse. You are the reason I was deprived of my job at the university. So you are the one who deserves this valuable gift the most. Dear Mark, by the time you read this letter, I will have turned to ashes because, in short, I cannot live with this curse. I promised you that when you read the answer, you would die of fear. I wasn't lying to you. Surely you touched the skin, and surely the curse has struck you even more. In the windswept town of Al-Bakara, the air buzzed with life and whispered secrets, laden with the rich scents of spices wafting through the winding markets, where vendors called out like sirens, beckoning passers-by toward their exotic wares. The sun dipped low on the horizon, spilling molten gold and crimson over centuries-old buildings that cradled tales of love, loss, and unexplainable phenomena. It was a place where shadows danced behind every corner and folklore mingled with fact. A place where magic was not just a fantasy, but a palpable force that occasionally slipped through the veils of reality. Among its restless inhabitants was Amir Malik, a bright-eyed university student with a ravenous thirst for knowledge and a penchant for delving into the obscure. With tousled black hair framing his angular face and inquisitive brown eyes darting with curiosity, Amir often found himself lost in the pages of dusty tomes that spoke of alchemy, astronomy, and the mystic arts. He would spend hours tucked away in the town's ancient library, a cathedral of knowledge adorned with towering shelves and hidden alcoves, where the musty scent of old parchment hung thick in the air, suffused with an inexplicable energy. But the weight of existence bore down on him. Mundane university life stifled his yearning for something greater, something that glittered just out of reach. He often recalled tales spun by his grandmother, whispers of ancient spirits, unearthly powers, and the seductive call of forbidden knowledge. These stories, which once filled him with wonder, now twisted in Amir's mind, beckoning him toward an insatiable desire to explore what lay beyond the veil. One fateful day, while combing through the grey, dust-coated shelves, Amir unearthed a weathered volume. the imitation of Shams al-Ma'arif. The cracked leather cover was adorned with cryptic symbols that seemed to shift as he gazed upon them. His heart raced as he cradled the book against his chest, a forbidden fruit tugging at the edges of his soul, whispering dark promises of power and understanding. Something primal stirred within him, a deep longing to explore the shadowy underbelly of magic, a siren song that promised liberation from life's disappointments. That evening, cloistered in his room, Amir lit a solitary candle, its frail flame flickering in the gathering darkness, casting elongated shadows that twisted upon the walls like phantoms welcoming him. A chill crept through the room, wrapping around him in a cold embrace as he opened the book for the first time. The pages were filled with twisted calligraphy and archaic symbols, telling the tales of rituals that could sway fate, summon spirits, and bind the essence of life itself. With each incantation that fell from his lips, a thick tension filled the air. The room darkened, shadows stretching and swirling as if alive, eagerly consuming the meager light from the candle. Amir's hands trembled with a mix of fear and exhilaration as he recited a forbidden spell, one that promised to imbue him with unimaginable wisdom. The temperature plummeted, a sharp wind sliced through the room, snuffing out his candle, the sudden plunge into darkness sending a wave of dread down his spine. Unyielding, Amir descended deeper into the text, drawn by an insatiable thirst for knowledge. His thoughts spiraled into a haze, and he stumbled across a passage detailing a harrowing ritual involving the blood of a black cat, a sacrificial offering to summon a jinn that could grant him omniscience and dominion over the darkness he had reluctantly invoked. Conflicted yet entranced, Amir stepped out into the cobbled streets of Al-Baqarah, where evening cloaked the town in an eerie quietude. The sky hung heavy with foreboding clouds, the moon obscured, casting shadows that seemed to whisper secrets of the night. He wandered through the winding alleys, lost in thought, when a sleek black cat flickered into view, perched atop a rickety fence, its luminous green eyes locking onto his with chilling resolve. The air thickened and crackled with unspoken tension, and in that moment, Amir felt as though time itself had stilled, everything hinging on this singular moment of reckoning. Taking a step forward, Amir's heart thundered in his chest. He reached out, enveloped in a haze of desperation and dark desire that drowned out his senses. The cat let out an unearthly screech, its fur bristling in alarm as it slipped through Amir's fingers like smoke. He stumbled, breath ragged, mind racing, as the echo of its cry died harshly in the night, leaving an unsettling void. Days turned into a warped ballet of nightmares. Amir became consumed by the insatiable thirst for power. Shadows unfurled around him, wrapping tendrils of darkness around his very soul. The connection with the Jinn Queen deepened, wrapped around his consciousness like a vengeful spectre, urging him ever deeper into the arcane. The eeriness of his family's household grew palpable. His little sister Amina, once a bright spark of joy, wandered the halls with a haunted gaze, speaking in hushed tones to unseen companions that only she could perceive. One blistering night, Amir had a vision that left him chilled to the bone. He saw Amina standing at the edge of their garden, entranced by the glow of the moonlight. "They're waiting for you, Amir," she whispered in an eerie tone that wasn't quite her own. "They want to play." Her eyes glimmered with an unnatural light, as if the shadows beckoned her closer to the abyss. In that moment, joining the embrace of the supernatural seemed inevitable. One night, unable to bear the tension any longer, Amir made a pact with the Jinn Queen, binding himself to her as he viciously recited the incantations he had memorized. The air throbbed with power as he drenched the circle in blood, his heart racing with exhilaration tinged with horror. The temperature plummeted, his breath formed clouds of frost, and he felt a chill seep into his bones as a presence loomed within the darkness. A tangible force that promised knowledge but threatened to devour his soul in return. From the depths of the shadows emerged the Jinn Queen, a figure adorned in flowing black silk, moving with a grace that belied her sinister purpose. Her eyes glowed with an unsettling intensity, filled with the depth of 1,000 eternal nights. "You summoned me, Amir," she hissed, her voice a sultry whisper that coiled around him. "What is it that you seek?" He hesitated, the weight of his desires crashing over him like a torrential wave. As he stood there, vulnerability exposed, the shadows behind her flickered, revealing sinister shapes that writhed and twisted as if they were alive. His heart raced with trepidation, yet he felt as if he were teetering on the brink of the ultimate truth. Then chaos ensued. Laughter echoed hollowly within the walls, a child's laughter morphing into an unearthly cacophony as Amina stood in silent horror, her body rigid, eyes wide as she caught sight of shadows spiraling around her. "Amir!" she cried, her voice breaking with fear as the shadows began to stretch toward her, tendrils reaching like clawed hands, hungry for the innocent essence of her spirit. "No!" Amir roared, lunging forward, desperate to save her, but the shadows formed a barrier, encapsulating the moment in a suffocating shroud of darkness. The Jinn Queen laughed softly, a melodic sound twisted with malice. "What is sacrificed must shift the balance," she said, her voice echoing in Amir's mind as he fought against the darkness that now encased his sister. In that moment, Amir could feel his sanity waning, terror enveloping him as he battled against the shadows that sought to claim Amina. The room expanded and contracted, bending and warping in a grotesque dance of confusion. He reached out but found himself trapped, visions cascading around him, images of his family's laughter twisted into haunting echoes within a dark abyss. Despair spiraled into anguish as Amina's silvery laugh faded into the clutches of terror. The entity he had summoned coiled tighter, the Jinn Queen's presence becoming unbearable, thick with malevolent intent. "You believe you can defy me," she taunted, drawing energy from Amir's fear, feeding upon it. The temperature plummeted further, and he felt ice seep into his veins, snuffing out hope with each passing second. Visions of their home flooding with darkness began to plague Amir's thoughts. His parents, engulfed by sorrow, his mother's eyes clouded with despair as laughter faded from their once vibrant household. Shadows danced hauntingly outside the windows, flickering in the periphery, feeding upon the moments that defined joy, leaving only an aching void behind. With horror cascading over him, Amir turned to his uncle Farid, desperately seeking help. He sought out his family, their love begging for deliverance from the chasm he had unwittingly created. But each plea only deepened the shadows that surrounded him. Night after night, he watched Amina wander deeper into the darkness, her spirit slipping away like sand through his fingers. A slow, agonizing descent. One fateful evening, despair surged like a tidal wave. He climbed to the rooftop once more, desperate, seeking the light of a full moon hidden behind clouds. With trembling fingers, he clawed through the remnants of the now reduced Shams al-Ma'arif, conjuring memories infused with regret. His sacrifice, his quest for power that had unraveled everything he cherished. The very essence of his being revolted against the darkness, yet the Jinn Queen's influence was a chain that bound him, pulling him deeper into the depths of her malevolence. "No more," he cried, raw emotion bursting forth as he poured out his heart in anguished desperation. He gathered strength, a flicker of resolve igniting within him. "I will release you. Take what you desire in place of my family." He could feel her presence recoil. The air grew thick with charged energy, echoing with uncertainty. Would she accept his offering? But the shadows around him contorted violently, responding with a furious howl, a manifestation of exquisite pain and loss. "You think you can bargain with me?" she shrieked, her laughter spinning into a tempest of malice and rage as she poured forth chaos upon the town, a wrathful storm of darkness that tore through the fabric of reality itself. All while Amir struggled against his own helplessness. The Jinn Queen's wrath unleashed chaos as power surged and streaked through the night sky, illuminating the clouds with ghastly hues of violet and crimson. The town reverberated with an otherworldly moan as the very ground seemed to tremble beneath the weight of a curse unleashed. Shadows leapt from alleyways, manifesting as dark tendrils that snatched at unsuspecting souls, howling as they fed on the fears of the innocents. Wails echoed through the town, mournful cries that spiraled into night, cleansing the very essence of joy from Al-Baqarah. Fearing for Amina and his family, Amir raced down the spiral staircase, the wooden steps creaking ominously beneath his weight, an echo of dread as he burst through the door, only to be met with chaos unfolding before him. The whispers had transformed into shouts, ghostly figures weaving a tapestry of despair, clutching at the air and reaching for those who tried to run. Panic rippled through the night, and shadows crowded around, mingling with the cries of terror and confusion. Within the suffocating darkness, Amir found his parents huddled in fear, holding Amina tightly. "Amir," his father shouted, eyes wide with disbelief, "what have you done?" The accusation hung in the air, mingling with the suffocating anxiety that gripped the house. The shadows writhed around them, reaching for strands of hope woven into their family's fabric, threatening to snuff out every flicker of light. Each time he felt he moved forward, the shadows snarled, dragging him back, their whispers weaving tales of despair and pain. "Amir," Amina cried, her voice echoing with raw anguish, reaching for him through the veil of darkness that encroached. "Help me." She stretched her small hands, pulling against the tendrils that sought to bind her. With heart racing, Amir lunged forward, striving to cut through the darkness encircling her, desperately reaching for her innocent soul. The Jinn Queen roared with unholy laughter, drawing strength from the chaos around her, pulsing with furious delight as a cacophony of expressions flickered across her ethereal face. Shadows rippled and flickered in discordant rhythms, wrapping tighter around Amir's family, feeding on their fear and despair, each hiss and snarl announcing the approach of madness. "Let me go," Amina screamed, tears mingling with the shadows that clawed upward, threatening to swallow her whole. The jinn's laughter twisted around Amir, urging him toward hopelessness, echoing in his mind a chilling melody that promised power while ripping apart the very fabric of his existence. Drawing upon the last vestiges of hope, Amir gathered his strength, defying the encroaching darkness. "I will not give in," he shouted, voice rising over the chaos. "You have no power here." His heart roared to life with righteous fury, a final surge of defiance. Illuminated by the flickering light of an old lantern that had survived the shadows, he began to chant the sacred words, invoking the light that had been buried under layers of torment. The very fabric of reality trembled as he fought against the tide, calling forth memories of joy and laughter, happiness that lingered like a heartbeat even in the deepening shadows. In his desperation, the words slipped from his tongue like a lifeline, weaving a shield around his family, illuminating the darkness with vibrations that erupted into a symphony of harmony. The shadows recoiled, howling in agony as they fought against the light, tendrils burning and snarling as the veil began to tear asunder. Amir could feel them twist, unraveling before the unwavering resolve of love, burning away at the tendrils that threatened to ensnare his family. "I cast you back," Amir shouted, the raw conviction propelling him forward as he tethered his soul to those he loved, intertwining their fates amidst the chaos. With a formidable rush, the forces collided, light meeting darkness in a cascade of brilliance that exploded like fireworks in a midnight sky. At that moment, the Jinn Queen shrieked, a sound filled with both fury and fear, her form twisting and contorting amidst the eruption of light. "You dare resist?" she roared, and in that moment of desperation, Amir could feel her power shatter against his will, the essence of darkness unraveling before the relentless onslaught of light. Caged in her own darkness, the queen howled as the shadows folded in around her, snapping like tendrils of smoke retreating from the light. The walls shuddered, and the very foundation of his home trembled as her form dissipated into oblivion, drawn back into the void from whence she had come. The oppressive weight of dread clawing at Amir's heart began to lift, replaced by a warm glow that enveloped his family. As the shadows receded, the laughter of his family echoed through the halls, illuminating their hearts once more. The frantic atmosphere twisted into tender relief as Amina raced into his arms, her spirit unbroken, her face bright with joy against the dark aftermath of despair. But the scars of their encounter remained. As the faint afterglow hummed around them, Amir felt the lingering shadows fluttering at the edges of his consciousness, warnings that he could never fully escape the entanglements of darkness. Reality settled back into a precarious calmness, leaving them huddled together inside the walls of their home as dawn broke. Fractals of light spilling in through the windows, scattering the remnants of gloom into the corners of the room. Despite the imminent dawn, a gnawing anxiety flickered in Amir's heart, an awareness that the whispers would never cease, that the shadows would always be waiting, coiled around the fragile threads of existence, patiently biding their time for another moment of weakness, for another seeker who dared to reach into the depths of the unknown. And as al-Baqarah awakened under the first light of day, Amir understood the price of forbidden knowledge, a lingering reminder that in the pursuit of power there lies an intoxicating danger, a darkness that can lay claim to the soul, echoing through eternities. With each passing moment, the fabric of the town would weave new stories, and somewhere within the heart of al-Baqarah, shadows would remain, whispering and curling, eternally awaiting the next brave soul willing to cross the threshold into the abyss. I am a young man ensnared in a nightmarish land where the sun mercilessly beats down upon parched earth, transforming it into a cracked wasteland of despair. The wind howls mournfully through that desolate landscape, carrying with it whispers of the damned, chilling the very marrow of my bones. In a village gripped by fear and ancient superstitions, the inhabitants regard me with a blend of awe and palpable terror. They approach with hesitant, cautious footsteps, as if I were a venomous creature poised to strike. Their eyes dart about, flickering with apprehension, betraying the unspoken dread of the darkness that looms just beyond their comprehension. Rumors swirl like malevolent spirits through the dusty streets, tales of my supposed powers weaving through the air, each tale growing more twisted and sinister with every telling. The desperate souls among them come to my door, their eyes sunken and hollow, believing I can grant their darkest desires or banish the shadowy specters that cling to their lives like a leech suckling on despair. Yet the agonizing truth is far more horrific. I do not possess true powers. I am merely a cunning trickster, weaving a web of illusion and deceit that ensnares them in a trap of my own design. The question gnawing at my very being remains: why do they label me a sorcerer, and why do I willingly embrace this harrowing role? My malignant gift manifests in an unsettling talent, the ability to pry open the fragile doors of the human heart and mind, exposing their deepest fears and squalid desires. Picture, if you can, a desperate woman, her sunken eyes gleaming with the reflection of her torment, begging me for deliverance from her abusive husband. She pleads, her voice trembling as she recounts lurid tales of pain and humiliation. A shiver of dread races down my spine as her words weave a tapestry of woe. "Make him love me," she cries, the desperation clawing at my own heartstrings. "Make him stop his cruelty." In that moment, a cruel ecstasy flickers through my veins, dark and insatiable, as sinister ideas cascade through my mind, each more twisted than the last. Steeling myself with icy resolve, I instruct her to inscribe arcane symbols onto a shard of tattered paper, to chant twisted incantations that roll off my tongue like poison, echoing from the dark corners of my haunted soul. I whisper, "Listen carefully, but do not speak, lest the shadows feast upon you. Avoid even the faintest flicker of conflict, or a darkness far worse than your husband's cruelty shall engulf you." Little does she know that if any woman chooses to listen and succumb to the caresses of her spouse's tyranny, she might witness a monstrous transformation. But her salvation would arise not from any spell, but rather from the intricate manipulation of her own reality. A twisted psychological game binding us all in despair. To the countless souls seeking my help, I wear the mask of a mystic, even as I am ensnared in a dance with shadows far darker and more lethal than the daylight outside. One fateful day, drenched in an oppressive silence that felt too heavy to bear, 3 men besieged my doorstep. They appeared as dark figures carved from the very fabric of despair, their weighty presence suffocating the air around them. Clad in robes that hinted at wealth yet radiated an ominous urgency, they drew closer, an unholy alliance teetering on the brink of nightmare. The eldest among them, a robust man named Edward, stepped forward, his face pale and ashen as though all warmth had fled his very being. The dread swelled in Edward's eyes like a storm cloud poised to break, and I felt the cold tendrils of despair tighten around me. "My son," Edward rasped, his voice quaking with an otherworldly tremor. He has fallen victim to a malignant spirit, a tormented creature that fastens itself to the innocent, siphoning away joy and vitality. His words lingered ominously in the air, pregnant with horror, echoing through the twisted recesses of my mind like the final toll of a death knell. Desperation hung around him like cloying smoke, sharp and suffocating. Only I could save his child from this insatiable darkness, he insisted, and in his eyes I saw a flicker of hope mingled grotesquely with raw terror, an anguished reflection that threatened to consume us all. He offered me gold, the kind that glimmers with promise yet carries the weight of doom, a fortune enough to make a heart hastily dance with greed. An intoxicating surge of exhilaration coursed through me, entwined with dread. This was the twisted path I craved, a chance to engage with malevolence itself, to weave myself into the dark tapestry of despair where innumerable spirits languish. My heart thrummed with excitement as I gathered my bag, brimming with dread-inducing tools of my trade, grotesque relics that had absorbed the agonies of countless souls. Twisted bones, dried herbs, and tomes filled with heretical knowledge whispered unspeakable truths, each one heavy with the crimes of its past. As we embarked on our foreboding journey toward Edward's home, the sun plummeted beneath the horizon, surrendering the world to an oppressive blanket of darkness. The sky bled dark hues of crimson and orange, a grotesque painting of death that seared the landscape, casting writhing shadows that resembled tormented souls in eternal agony. As we traveled deeper into the wilderness, a realm where reality twisted like a serpent ready to strike, an unnatural silence encased us like a shroud, smothering my senses. The air became dense, stifling, each breath pulling me deeper into the crisis of entrapment. Dread quickened my pulse as my mind betrayed me, conjuring visions of horrors lurking just beyond the reach of my headlights. Suddenly, a dark figure materialized before us, an apparition entwined with tenebrous shadows. A specter cradling a black cat, its eyes glinting like polished obsidian, glaring into my very soul. Terror surged through me, a frantic pulse racing through my veins, even before Edward let out a strangled scream, a sound reminiscent of a beast caught in its death throes. I slammed my eyes shut, heart pounding with primal instinct, desperate to disbelieve the unfolding nightmare. But in an instant, the figure melted into the darkness, vanishing like a melting candle before the chill of an unfathomable night. Moments later, fate's cruel thump delivered a dire blow. A gaunt figure appeared on the cracked asphalt ahead of us, past the cruel gleam of the headlights, a shadow so emaciated it could slip through the very fabric of reality itself. I felt dread coil tightly in my stomach, a serpent tightening its grip as the figure drew closer, its face obscured, yet bearing an unsettling familiarity that twisted my heart into a knot. Unholy recognition gnawed at my thoughts, a monstrous terror already unfurling. Panic seized Edward. He screamed as if gripped by primal terror, his hands clawing at the steering wheel as he tried to evade the dark harbinger of doom. But our frantic efforts to escape proved futile, and the inevitable crash arrived with a sickening finality. The vehicle careened violently into the embrace of a gnarled tree, the impact reverberating with the force of 1,000 tormented wails. The sound of metal screaming and wood splintering merged into a symphony of anguish that resonated in my ears like a haunting lament for our doomed endeavors. As the acrid scent of gasoline engulfed the cabin, a sickening realization washed over me. We were ensnared within a tale of our own creation, deepening the horrors around us. Panic exploded in the air, hearts pounding like trapped animals as we clawed at the doors, scrambling into the oppressive embrace of the darkened night, desperately seeking an escape from the unseen terrors that lurked just beyond our vision. Yet I found myself frozen in place, horrified in a paralyzing grip that coiled around my throat with unyielding force. Shadows slithered beneath the vehicle, a relentless and insistent force tugging at my senses, the echo of dread clawing at my sanity. With trembling fingers, I reached for the door, bracing for the unfathomable terror I felt just outside the metal barrier. What emerged from the suffocating shroud of darkness was a sight wrenching enough to tear sanity asunder. A filth-encrusted hand, grotesquely decayed, clawing desperately at the door with an urgency steeped in malevolence. The skin had rotted and shriveled, a morbid testament to the ravages of fate. None of it was human anymore, merely a ghastly mockery of what once was. Driven by sheer instinct, I fought against my own paralyzing dread. I slammed the door shut with fervor born of panic, but the insistent force outside was terrifying, almost supernatural in its hunger for release. Instantly, the door burst from its hinges with an ear-splitting crash, collapsing against the ground like a fallen angel bathed in despair. In the opening lay an emaciated figure, a man drenched in blood, his eyes seething with unholy fury, emitting a primal, bone-chilling growl that threatened to scorch the very air around us. He lunged toward me, bared fangs dripping with malice, the scent of death wrapping around him like a shroud, grasping at my throat, unleashing waves of terror that set my heart racing with the primal instinct for survival. Edward and the other men screamed, voices merging into a cacophony of despair as they attempted to subdue the deranged man writhing in their grasp. Frenzy surged within me as I fumbled through the relics in my bag, desperately grasping at the artifacts that had once made me feel powerful. I withdrew a leather whip fashioned from the skin of a wolf, an artifact suffused with dark folklore, its very presence demanding reverence. Legends claimed it possessed the ability to control spirits and dark entities, yet I stood terrified, unsure of the very powers I had once manipulated to my advantage. As I wielded the whip against the man, striking him repeatedly, I felt a twisted sense of glee intermixed with dread. Blood splattered against the walls, a grotesque mural illustrating the horror of our struggle. He howled not in agony, but in victory, feeding on the terror that surrounded him, while his eyes gleamed with a malevolent glee that seemed to devour the very light. An ecstatic dance of life and death, roiling deeply in the macabre. In the throes of panic, I hurried to recite an incantation from the Sun of Knowledge, a tome weighted down by blood-soaked history and sinister truths. My voice trembled as I called upon forgotten forces, my heart hammering in a desperate rhythm. The air thickened, charged with unseen dangers, and as my words spilled into the night, the man's voice twisted into something grotesque, a guttural growl laced with a malicious intelligence. "I will not leave you, son of Adam. I will not leave you, human." With those words, thick, acrid smoke billowed from his mouth, clawing its way toward me, a wicked spectre eager to reclaim lost souls. Shadows advanced, snaking around me, and I gasped for breath, feeling my chest tighten under the weight of their malevolent presence. I felt the temperature plummet, icy tendrils tethering me to the ground, rendering me helpless against the mounting horror. Chaos erupted, and the desperate screams of Edward and the others faded into an infinite abyss as they raced into the night, driven by sheer terror, a reaction deeply rooted in instinct. And I remained, an unwilling witness to the monstrous reality unfurling around me, strings of destiny pulling tighter, wrapping around my throat until I could hardly breathe. My consciousness faltered and flickered, fading into an oppressive void, swallowed by the all-encompassing darkness that enveloped me. When awareness returned, I found myself sprawled in a sterile hospital room, the air thick with the acrid scent of antiseptic and sorrow. Blinding fluorescent lights pulsed overhead like a malevolent heartbeat, casting a harsh glow that carved cruel shadows across the walls. Time twisted around me like a relentless spectre, second after second bleeding into an eternity that weighed heavy against my soul, a clock ceaselessly counting down to my inevitable reckoning. The gnawing dread clawed at me, a shapeless behemoth refusing to be banished. Haunted dreams plagued my slumber, grotesque visions weaving through the fabric of my nightmares, and the darkness that had chased me lingered long after waking, gnawing at the corners of my sanity like a ravenous beast. With every creaking door and rustling shadow, the world began to close in, suffocating me under the weight of an encroaching dread. I gathered the remnants of my shattered courage, deciding to banish the artifacts that had ensnared me in this cursed existence. Collecting every relic that had once aligned me with shadows, wicked treasures, tainted tomes, dark talismans steeped in otherworldly whispers, I locked them away in a decaying chamber, surrendering my heart to dread of what lay within. But the shadows would not relent. Each tortured night dragged me back into their grasp, tightening their fingers around my throat until I could scarcely breathe. Again and again, the anguished cries echoed through the emptiness, and each creak of the house reverberated like the sound of chains binding me to my despair. One bleak night, I jolted awake to a deep, sorrowful wail, a mournful cry of agony that echoed through the walls like the lament of tortured spirits yearning for release. It was accompanied by the incessant screech of that black cat, its cries filtering through the darkness like an ominous omen, sounding far too close for comfort. A shiver crept down my spine, mingling fear and curiosity in a relentless whirlwind. I stumbled toward the source of the sound, heart pounding against my ribcage as dread coiled in my gut like a viper, warning me of the horrors waiting just beyond the door. With slow, trembling hands, I pushed it open, an act of reckless defiance against the shroud of night. In the gloom, a grotesque sight met my eyes. A dish lay upon the floor, grotesquely adorned with a putrid piece of flesh, marred with an intricate skull-shaped tattoo, a ghastly offering to the void. My stomach roiled, and bile rose in my throat as understanding crashed into me like a tidal wave, drowning me in despair. But beside it lay a piece of human skin, inked with words dripping with malice. Azael invites you to next year's feast. Frozen in horror, realization clawed at my mind like jagged glass shards. I had unwittingly opened a dark chasm, summoning forces that now clamored for retribution, marking me as an unwilling pawn in their unholy game. With shadows closing in around me, brushing against my skin like the ghostly fingers of the forgotten, I felt my sanity crack, splintering under the weight of despair. Even as I felt the encroaching oblivion threaten to swallow me whole, an unsettling knowledge crept into my heart. I had become a vessel for evil, a repository of darkness entwined with the sinister threads of fate. As the air thickened with rising dread, whispering secrets of carnage and horror, I knew that my story was far from over. I existed within the age-old cycle of fear, trapped within an eternal nightmare that would twist and turn with each breath, a specter bound to the shadows. The night would take its due, and I had inadvertently invited the darkness to claim me. No longer merely a participant, but a willing servant to the very evil I had once sought to conjure. The impending doom pressed in upon me, reminding me that I was not a master, but a mere pawn caught in an inescapable web of shadows, surrendering to the insatiable appetite of the darkness I had unwittingly unleashed.